Everyone, welcome to another episode of What Do You Know with Joe, our second episode of our new season. I'm here joined with the great Karl Alzner. Karl was a former professional hockey player, a great one, and now currently in with a company called Thundercat. We're going to dive into more what his role is with business development, covering FSIs, all that. But Karl, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to talk.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk hockey, and then when you can mix it with a little bit of cybersecurity, government cyber sales, tech sales, it just kind of layers another thing on top that I'm trying to talk about more because I don't know it nearly as good as I know hockey.
Oh my God, you're talking federal government, FSIs, sales, technology. You said cybersecurity, music to my ears. I can't believe it. But yeah, no, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Thundercat was like an official sponsor of the Capitals, and I think has like a little logo, either was it on the ice or somewhere in the rink. I'm pretty sure like they're one of the major ones for.
They are, yeah. So our COO is actually a big Caps fan. There's a ton of Caps fans at the company, and
Yeah.
I think they've always wanted to be involved in some capacity. And then with me coming over, it kind of just pushed them over the edge of becoming a big partner, because we have some of our competitors that have been partners for a while. So like we might as well get in the ring too. And so
right, exactly.
It's getting a little competitive, maybe more competitive on our side than anyone else's side, but that's the way it is sometimes.
Right. And I'm sure there's a lot of people at your company that are like, I'm gonna go meet Karl at the water cooler just to catch up. Be like, hey man, how's did you catch the game last night? Something like that. You do it with your buddy down the hall, but you're like, shit, that's Karl Alzner. But are you based out of Reston, Virginia? Where are you located?
So the company's in Reston. I'm in McLean.
Okay.
So when I was here playing, we lived in Arlington and then here in Alexandria, and I had driven through McLean a little bit, but never really knew much about the area. I knew that some of our the ownership for the team was in McLean, Great Falls area.
Beautiful area.
Yeah, and so like I said, I didn't know anything about it. And then when we were back home during COVID, and I had heard a bunch of the guys were moving out of Arlington after we left and we're moving into McLean. And we're like, well, where should we go when we come back? I mean, we know Arlington, but all the people that we really hung out with a ton are now moving to McLean. So let's just find something here. So sight unseen, not knowing anything about it, we picked a house and now we're here. So we like it a ton. We're super central. It's so easy for me to get to Reston. Whenever as we were talking before this, when I mess up my scheduling and I realize I have a meeting in 15 minutes, I can get to the office in 10. So it works out good.
No, and it's funny you say that. I was about to say, like, anyone who's familiar with the area, you just either hop on 66 or 495 or something, and you can be in Reston from McLean in about like 10, 15 minutes. It's not that bad. And it's especially coming from McLean, you're going against that morning traffic too, which is nice if you ever have to go in. So you plan that out pretty well, speaking of scheduling. So, but yeah, I can't wait to talk more, just all about your career and your new career and what you're doing. But we can start all the way back at the beginning, because everyone's interested, right? where it all comes from, and learning more just about you and how you've grown in your career and what got you there. So you were a little bit you're born from Canada. You're from Canada, Burnaby, kind of close to Vancouver, right? Like what was your childhood like? What did you get into? Siblings, family. Tell me a little about it. What you want to share about kind of like your upbringing there and what it was like.
Yeah, sure. So to give everyone an idea, Burnaby would be like Burnaby to Vancouver would be like Arlington to McLean, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're touching each other. So it may have a small town sounding name, but Burnaby is like I don't know what it's at now, but when I grew up, it was between 300, 400,000 people. So like a big city. With Vancouver right there. Yeah, it was definitely city living. And so both my parents just ultra competitive. And so they put me into every sport possible. I showed interest in pretty much every single sport. I lived next door to my elementary school. So it was, back when you had a little bit more freedom. I wouldn't say I'm old, but I was kind of, being born in that 1983 to 1990 range where you had like a mix of, you can still appreciate no internet. Yeah. But now we also are growing up with cell phones and all this and AI.
Right.
So I was in that sweet spot. So my parents, it was just, go ahead and go play, come back later when it's dark, when you're hungry, whatever it is. So I was fortunate in that sense that it was if it wasn't street hockey, it was basketball, it was soccer, throwing baseball around. It was just nonstop. And my dad wanted to beat me at everything. So had competition all the time. I had an older sister, but she figure skated and played softball. So our sports didn't necessarily overlap.
Uh-huh.
So there wasn't a ton of competition between us, but my dad made sure that I got enough of it at home, and even cards, like
Yeah.
that was one of the things when I retired. My wife was like, you need to find something to do because you're getting too competitive at playing board games and cards. You don't have an outlet right now. And so it was pretty funny. So yeah, that was kind of what my upbringing was like. And then I played, like I said, played everything. All of my closest friends, school friends, not a single one of them played hockey. They were great street hockey players, but no one was on the ice ever. And so that was just one of the things that I did away from them, and grew up loving and watching Hockey Night in Canada. And yeah, it's what you do up north. If you don't play hockey, then you're at least watching hockey. Typically.
Right. You're around the sport in some aspect. And it's funny you mentioned like all the sports, and I'm imagining a young Karl Alzner, slinging it from short to first. But you brought it up, like, that competitive nature. I mean, you brought up a good point. I mean, even when, I grew up playing sports as well, never to the level, you got to, or anything close to that. But it's funny that like that competitive nature, right? It's still fun. Like it's not serious, but you're also like, I'm gonna beat you just because like I want to win. Like it's just the natural nature of it. And I think that's okay in some aspect, but no, I think I'd be curious to know if your sister ever critiqued any of your skating while you were on the ice, being like, hey, by the way, you lift a little better here. You need to be more fluid. That'd be funny. Just, see that overlap.
You definitely did. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. We always, as hockey players, we're always saying we hate going on the ice after figure skaters because they chew up the ice with their picks and all that. But at the same time, we're just like, holy smokes, they're good. But they're such better skaters than us. The stride is a little bit different, but their edge work is phenomenal and their flexibility is crazy. So yeah, it's not a ton, but more in baseball, because I played a ton of baseball too. So I'd say if there was anything, we would throw the ball at each other maybe a little bit too hard. And he was definitely more wild than I was as well. So you never knew where it was coming. Like you had your target out there, but anything was on the table. So it was kind of funny. But just going back to the ultra competitiveness, I have probably one of my biggest regrets in life came from a moment at school where it just, that competitive nature took over. And so in grade 7, we have this trip. We go to this place called Timberline Ranch, and it was I think it was a week-long trip, and you're all in cabins, right? So you choose the people you want to stay with in the cabin. Mm-hmm. Usually your 6, 7 closest friends.
Right.
And so we had this tight group of 7 of us. And so we'd be playing these games at lunch. Sometimes it's basketball. Sometimes it's like a version of volleyball with a beach ball. And so a bunch of us were on one team, and one of the other guys who was very, very good athletically was on the other team. And we got into it just so heated that one lunch. It just so happened to be right after that lunch is when we were putting in the names for who we wanted to stay with. And we had talked about it all year long, and we were so excited to stay in the cabin all together. And we were so mad at him because he was trying to beat us that we excluded him. And so he was the only one of that friend group that didn't get to be there. And we still talk about it to this day. And it was like, man, that was so stupid of me. Just like, because I was the ringleader at that point with the sports. And so I was like, man, no, we're leaving him ran out. He's not allowed in this cabin after what he did last lunch, whatever. Some of those times it takes over, and I've learned to settle down and leave it out there. But yeah, it was a big regret. And it's maybe to hear, but it was a big regret.
It's a moderation thing, it's good and it's great, but you don't, as a kid, especially if you're into it's funny you mentioned that. Like similar kind of story with like a basketball camp with a buddy. We're friends now, we're good and everything like that, but I didn't know him at the time we were younger, and it was like, it's a basketball camp, nothing super serious, but like, it's, you start getting in the playoffs, you start getting competitive, and it was one of those things where it was like a questionable call. And I was like, hey, yeah, we like kind of clapped and whatever, and I got a good shove, and it was one of those things where like, it was like no big deal. But I remember later on, like when I finally met him, like I was like, I know exactly who you are. Like it was one of those things where it can still like, it gets caught up in the heat of the moment. And it's hard not to. But,
you got to give yourself a break, right?
Yeah, exactly. But great friendships and everything can come from that. So there you go. So like, when did you start noticing that, like, okay, hockey's something, like you said, you played baseball, soccer, a bunch of different sports. What made you kind of say, like, okay, like, I think I'm pretty good at this hockey thing, and like I'm starting to notice maybe my skills getting better. Like, when did that kind of kick in? When did you kind of start noticing, okay, maybe I can play this more and more and I'm getting better and better compared to the rest of everybody else?
Yeah, so I'd say that it kind of built. So yeah, like I said, played all the sports. At one point, so when I was playing lacrosse, I was getting frustrated because I'd be passing the ball to other kids and they weren't catching it. And then I was like, you know what, this isn't fun for me anymore. Like I want to be able to play pass with someone during the game. So lacrosse, see you later. Soccer I liked quite a bit, but I kept and still to this day I have hip flexor issues and I kept tweaking my hip flexors all the time, and so it wasn't fun anymore. It was like just painful to play, which was at a young age, it didn't seem right. And so soccer, see you later. And then I just played basketball at school all the time, so it was never organized basketball, but I loved basketball, so I just kept doing that at school. That was my school sport. And then it became between baseball and hockey, really. And so baseball is a pretty big sport where I'm from. Not quite like hockey, but pretty big. And I loved playing baseball. I was a pretty good baseball player. I played catcher all the time, but I wanted to play third base. And I just had to go back behind the plate because I think on my team I was the best at it. And so it was always that, like, I like baseball because I'm good at it.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated that I don't ever get to play the position. Whereas hockey, I got to play the position that I liked, and I'd say mid-range to upper mid-range of skill level.
Yeah.
And so when it came to time when, it went in from you're on season and then you're also playing during the off season, I had to make a decision just based off of schedule. Yeah. And so that was at 14. And then I decided, baseball, although it's more fun for me, I'm going to go with hockey just because I get to play defense.
Yeah.
And then that was where it was. So I never really thought that I was necessarily that good at hockey, but I was bigger than a lot of the kids. I could skate forwards and backwards and I could raise the puck. And so that's kind of how it took off for me. And then it just kept going. But I was always very middle of the row, like I never made the AAA team.
Right.
My first years, it would always be the second year when I was older than everybody else. So it was just more of this is fun. Let's continue on with that. And then I grew it, honestly, so much in hockey. Now it's different. Now, if you have skill, you can be small. But back when I was coming up, it's like if you were 5'11" and taller, like you're going to get a chance. And I was kind of in that range.
Okay. And so, like, how did you kind of, because obviously you could argue you made a great choice looking back on it. How did you, like, how'd you get into, and again, apologies because I don't know how far they are, but like when you were playing, how'd you make that jump to juniors? Kind of explain what juniors is a little bit, and like, what was that first game kind of like feeling like? Because like you said too, and I think a lot of people who've played sports growing up especially understand that, like, once you start putting a lot of focus in it, you start playing with like those like clubs or teams that are like, its sole purpose is just get you ready to try to get you to next level. Things kind of turn on a little bit more from a competitive standpoint, but also like, it's everyone's interested and everyone's, trying to play at a high level. Tell us about like juniors, what that kind of is, and like what like being in Calgary, like how that all kind of felt.
Sure. Yeah. So the way it works, and I'm starting to understand it a little bit more now with my kids coming up, is it's all like, U10, U12, U14, whatever you want to call it now. So what I did was I played my last year of what was called Bantam. So that gets you up to 14 years old. And then after that, and I know that we don't say these words anymore really, but that's just what they were called when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But then would be midget, right? That's what the next level is. And so midget in BC was not very good, right? We didn't have prep schools. We didn't have any of that stuff yet. So your decision is you go to midget and you play a year or two, and then you hopefully get drafted into major junior. If you don't get drafted into major junior, then you play what we call junior A, and that's more of like a feeder for college.
Okay.
So what I did is instead of going to play midget, I played junior B. So that's with kids, I guess you could say, that are from 15 all the way to 2021. And
Ooh,
so, yeah, so it's a big jump because you're playing with men
yeah,
as well as some kids. You have a half visor on, there's fighting, there's all that stuff. We used to call it the jungle because it was a lot of guys that were just still hanging on and wanted to throw fists and play dirty and all that stuff. But you'd get a few kids like me at 15, 14, 15 sprinkled in that had some skill that were hoping to still make it.
yeah,
So my team, we were called the Richmond Sockeyes, and we had, I think, 4 or 5 of us that were 15 years old, that came to play that year, mixed with like a lot of 19, 20, and a couple 21-year-olds. So it was a really weird mix.
yeah.
I got eye gouged for the first time at 15 on the ice by a guy named Braden Mint, who was an absolute killer. Uh, I just remember thinking like, man, this is crazy. Like I need to find a way to get out of this league because it's nuts. But at the same time, our team was great. We made it all the way to nationals and ended up losing in the finals there. So heartbreaking. We should have won that, and it was unfortunate. But that feeds you into major junior. So I got drafted that summer out of that.
Okay.
I got drafted by Calgary, and there's like a handful of teams in the Western League that you're really excited to go to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Calgary being one of them, the Calgary Hitmen. And as a wrestling fan growing up, when your team is named after Bret the Hitman Hart, like you're pretty excited
yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah.
And so ended up going to Calgary and played 4 years there that were just awesome. Same thing, had great teams there, but continued to fall short, unfortunately, which ended up being, a good chunk of the story of my career, having great teams and not quite being able to get over the hump. So yeah, it was pretty interesting time in Calgary, but I was fortunate that I got to play on the national team a couple times.
Yeah.
We had great teams there too. So yeah, that's kind of how the transition went. Finished playing minor hockey, decided college wasn't for me. I want the fastest path to the NHL,
Yeah.
which was junior B, major junior, and then luckily was drafted out of that.
I appreciate you sharing that because I didn't know that process, and I think a lot of people listening will learn from that. And you kind of touched on it a little bit when you said like playing in junior B, like you played with some rough, tough guys, and again you're playing 21-year-olds, which I'm trying to think of any sport in the States that even allows you to kind of do that because it is pretty like segmented now by like age. I mean, I'm thinking about like when I played like football growing up, like you basically they did by weight class. So you could be playing like if you're in 6th grade and say you're a bigger kid, you could be playing with like 8th graders. But like once you got to high school, that was like your high school team. So you never were playing with anyone really older. And like that's
Yeah,
crazy.
so get this too. So in hockey, like I think a lot of other sports, they have their rookie parties and initiation, right?
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
when I joined the team, I was still 14. So my rookie party happened when I think it was, I can't remember if it was I just turned 15 or it was just about to turn 15.
Yeah.
So the legal drinking age in Canada is also in BC is 19. And so at my rookie party, like I was just chugging like 151 and all this stuff that I should not be drinking at 14, 15 years old with adults, right? And like it was nuts. There was a fight at the party. It was just a weird thing to be a part of, but I guess it makes you grow up pretty fast because
I was just gonna say that, yeah.
Yeah, I ended up moving away at 15, and I was somewhat prepared for it because of a few of the experiences I had. So it was super strange when there's that big of an age gap. But then you get it again when you're in the NHL. But at least at that point, everyone's an adult. So
right. But like in your point, like, and it's kind of alluding to my next question. I mean, like, it's a double-edged sword, right? You're like, wow, like at 14, getting exposed to a lot of this. But at the same time, like you said, I'm sure later on in your career, where it might have shook someone else in their skates, you're like, this is just another Tuesday afternoon kind of thing. You did like get some flashes of greatness while you're playing juniors. It's funny also the competitive nature, like, right? You're like, all you really do remember, especially is like those times, especially when you got this close and you just couldn't, like you said, get over the hump. But you were selected as a captain as well, and then you kind of allude to what are like three, if you have three, maybe it's less, like lessons that you learned in your time in juniors that you're like, okay, it really did help you. You saw it in the next level. Maybe it's maybe it's your rookie party. Maybe that was one of them. But like, what was like some things you learned in that took you to the next stage?
You know what? I'd say that there's definitely a few. And let's say the first two that I would say are maybe don't necessarily make sense, but they will. I'd say the first one is to always have confidence in what you're doing. You may not know everything, but a lot of times you're there for a reason, especially in sports, right? If I'm playing on this team, I'm here for a reason, right? They think I'm
Yeah.
good, and so I should also think I'm good enough. So I remembered that the one thing that I really, really would pride myself on is my one-on-one play, right? As a defenseman, being able to go up against any forward, any defenseman, didn't matter what it was. I felt, 99 times out of 100, I'm going to win that battle. And so a guy on my team, his name's Ryan Getzlaff, might not know him so much out here because he played on the
Yeah.
West, played out West for most of his career.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but anyone who's a hockey fan knows, right? His nickname was Ryan Gretzlaff after winning.
Damn. That's high praise.
Yeah, the guy was he was a player, and junior was just too easy for him, right? He was already at an NHL caliber in junior, and so he was on my team. And so I just remember everyone always being like, "Oh man, I got to go one-on-one against Getz in practice." And for me, it was like I'm excited about it. Like I'm going to beat him. That's what I do. And so remember every practice it was that I got a chance to go against him. It was me versus him, and he probably wasn't thinking he's like, this is just some 15, 16-year-old kid. But for me, that was the thing, right? I had confidence knowing that I can beat him. This is what I'm good at. I'm going to do that. But the other lesson at the same time, I would say, is I would always tell myself that there's players better than me, right? So maybe it sounds a little bit weird. I had confidence in my ability, but I was always telling myself that I wasn't as good as that person, right? So for me, that was I need to get better. I need to be in better shape. If I don't have as good of a shot as John Carlson, I need to be in better shape than John. If I don't have as good hands as Nick or as good of a passer, I'm going to be able to work him into the ground, though. I'm going to be tougher than him, whatever it may be, right? So those were the two things, having confidence in my ability, but at the same time, I pushed myself to the edge, probably more times than I should have. But I think that really is what helped drive me, and I just, you absolutely need to hate to lose. Everyone always says you got to love to win, but I don't know. I was a hate to lose kind of guy. And so maybe that's why I bring up the shortcomings versus the things that were good.
No, but I think you harp on a good point there. I mean, if I hate to lose, the only other side of that is like I'm gonna win. If I hate to lose, it's only competitive. And I think to your point, like, and that's probably why I got you so far in your career is that you know that you're good, right? But I think it's a broad lesson too, is like you can always get better. Like you see something in someone else, you're like, I would like to apply that and I want to be better than that. I want to get to that level. And I think that's a healthy balance of being like, okay, I can do well, but I also want to make sure I'm sharpening my skills, getting better, because whether it's that person in front of you or I'm trying to get in front of, or you never know who's coming behind you, you always need to be prepared. You always need to make sure that you're keeping your tool sharp. You're being the best, professional you can be. And I think a lot of people also should take away what you said was, if you're part of a team or if it's your work and you're part of something, they picked you for a reason. You're able to do that job. You're able to do it, and you're going to be good at it. So just have that confidence to say, yeah, I can do that. And it's a good balance. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And as you're telling me these stories, I'm thinking to myself, like, I have so many more questions I should have added to our list of questions. But in your final year of WHL, and I'm going to bring up something you said at the end there, but at the last, in your final year, you were named Defenseman of the Year. And I think a lot of that probably goes to your credit of, how you worked. And, once you got that award in your final year, when did you start kind of hearing the murmurs of the NHL draft, and like, when did you start getting tapped on by like teams or going to like whether I don't know if it was like a showcase or something like that? When did you start kind of also being like, okay, they're talking about me not only being like draft pick, I'm starting to get a lot. I'm top 10. I'm starting to get top 5, 5th draft pick, by the way, everybody. So like it's just one of those things. Like how did that process go? And like tell us about that last year.
Yeah, so it was pretty strange. I mean, I knew what the milestones were, like kind of the things that you should try and hit if you wanted to have a chance to play. But going back to my mentality of there's better players than me. Like I was always I wanted to be the best. Right?
Yeah.
So I was comparing myself to players that were at the absolute top. But I never really put myself in that category, right? And so But I knew what one of the milestones was, and that was to make the World Junior team, the Team Canada World Junior team. And anyone who made that team um, got just tons of eyes on you. It was almost like they gave you an extra 10 feet of leash, right? If you could make that team, they were going to give you an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that's what I needed to try and make. And so when I got invited to the camp at 18, so typically those teams are made up of 18 and 19-year-olds, mostly 19-year-olds. So I got invited to that camp at 18, and I was one of only a few guys that were 18 at the time. And you take 7 defensemen, right? And so I saw that there was 5 returning players from the year before, I think. So realistically, that was only 2 spots. And so I'm like, crap, like I need to find a way to make this team. What do they want from me? At that point, my game was fairly well-rounded. I mixed in some offense with defense, but I wasn't overly special offensively at all. And at that tournament, at least the way they were picking the teams then, is they wanted players that were very, very responsible, that could really lock it down defensively, as well as play a bit of a physical game and all that. And so I fit that mold, right? And so I knew there's another guy who's having an awesome, awesome year offensively. He was probably going to make the team, an older guy. And then it came down to me and one other player. And the other player happened to be my teammate and probably my best friend at the time too, who's my defense partner. And he was a year older than me. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, this is tough because this is his last opportunity to make this team. Whereas I know I'm going to have another chance next year. I want to make it personally, but for his career, it would be better if he made it,
Yeah.
And so I think they ended up picking me because I was younger and they knew they were going to need some returning players the following year. And so I ended up making that team. And I was only one of two 18-year-olds that made the team and then one 17-year-old, which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
And so once that happened, I was kind of like, okay, like I'm on the radar, I wasn't drafted yet because I'm a late birthday. So I'm going to do this tournament and then I'm going to get drafted the next summer. And if I've made the Team Canada at 18, that's going to mean something. So I get to the tournament and this is actually pretty funny. So I was, going back to what I said, confident, in my abilities, knew that I should be there. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, oh man, these guys are all pretty freaking good.
Mm-hmm.
So we get into our first exhibition game, and it's against Finland in Finland. And Tuukka Rask was the goalie, which big name in hockey, and he was unbelievable in junior. And we go into that game, and I score like 5 minutes into the game on Tuukka, and I'm like, oh damn, like look at this,
nice,
yeah. and then like shortly after, I get an assist, and we win the game 3-2, I think it was, and I'm like, this is easy. Holy smokes! And so we play that, then we go in to play Sweden the next exhibition game in Sweden, and they were like between us and them and the US, like we were kind of the top 3. And 10 minutes into the game, I score again, and I'm like, Jesus, I'm going to light this tournament up. Like, this is going to be awesome. And then right after that, we go to win a face-off in the D zone. We win it straight back to me, and I go to like just, we're battling stick to stick. So I just go to swipe it over to my D partner, and it just kind of goes off the stick weird, and our goalie wasn't quite ready and ended up going straight into our net. And I'm like, oh man, that sucks. So, I was a little shaken after that. And then in the next period, one of their guys just comes across the blue line, goes to wind up for a slap shot. This is like so routine as a defenseman. Just stick your stick in front, tip it out, tipped it top corner. And I'm just like, wow, okay. So I've scored 2 goals. I've also scored 2 against myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't good. And it kind of, I think, put a little bit of a sour taste in the coach's mouth. It was just like, maybe he's a little shaky right now. So I didn't end up playing a ton in the first half of the tournament. It wasn't until towards the end where I was playing. But I mean, it's a long way to say it. That just gave me, being in that tournament kind of gave me the confidence that I needed to know that I was thought of in that top rank. And then I made it the next year again. I was named captain of my junior team and then of that Team Canada team. So we won back-to-back gold medals. I got drafted by the Caps. It was just kind of like a lot happened in a year and a half that really made me think that I was, now I'm on the radar now. Like I need to make sure that I'm continuing to grow and use that extra leash that I've been given now to do something with it. Cause I think a lot of guys get comfy after that.
Yeah, no, I could see that, and I can feel like, right, like you said, right, like that 10-foot leash. It's like it's a good thing, means you're out of space. But if you use that and like put some slack in it, so to speak, you could fall right behind, because like you said, there's once you especially get to that level, there's so many people that either miss the last year and have a chance to come back, like you said, or like this is their last shot, so they're gonna give it everything they have. So you give up any little bit of slack, you're putting yourself in a position to potentially lose everything you've worked for. And you kind of alluded, you name dropping some amazing names here, but that 2007 draft was stacked. Like Patty Kane going first, Van Riemsdyk, Subban, you, a bunch of other players in that draft. Like, when did did you have to like hire an agent? Did he basically say like, hey, these are the teams that are looking to draft you if you're on the board? Did like the Capitals reach out to you? Did you talk to like Boudreaux or anybody? Like, what was like what was he the coach at the time when you were getting drafted?
Glenn Hanlon was the coach.
Glenn Hanlon. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. So I had an agent when I was 14. So
okay,
it's pretty young, because that's when you're starting to get drafted into junior teams, and you need some representation there just in case anything's happening. You need someone to talk to the coaching staff, all that. So I had the agent then. And so leading up to it, we have the same thing that the NFL has. They have a combine, right? And so they only invite, I think it's the top 50 projected draft picks to that. And so you do all the workout stuff, you do all the interviews. Depending on where you're slated to go, you have more interviews than others. And at the time, I was ranked in the top 7, I think. And so I didn't have maybe as many interviews as everybody else. I think I had maybe like 15, from 1 to 15, just in case, right? And so I remember my training, like I was in good shape, but I've never been a good sit-up guy, and I've just, for whatever reason, I cannot do sit-ups that well. And I remember I'll go to do my test, and it's to like a metronome, right? So it's like up, down.
Yeah.
So the guy's like, okay, you ready? I'm like, yep. He's like, all right, and up. And I go to get up, and like no one's holding on to your feet, nothing. This is all you. You're not allowed to lift your feet. And I didn't even make it up the first one.
Damn.
And I just kind of like go back, and he's like, whoa. He's like, are you okay? Do you want to try again? I'm like, is that okay? Do you mind?
Yes.
He's like, yeah, we can try again.
Oh, the fluke. That first one was a fluke. That's crazy that happened. Yeah, just had to get that out.
Yeah, I think I ended up getting like 5 or 6 sit-ups, and I was like, holy crap, that's going to really ruin my overall score. So I was the combine, but I had meetings with a lot of teams. I met with Washington there. I had a really, really terrible meeting with them. So I was like, they're off. Like,
that's crazy.
Not getting picked. I met with LA 3 times leading up to the draft, and LA picked 4th. So right before where I ended up being picked. So I was like, okay, LA needs a defenseman. I think there's a good chance I'm going to LA. And I met with Edmonton as well, a bunch, who was picking 6th. So I'm like, okay, LA or Edmonton. As I'm leaving to go to the draft, from the hotel, Kelly Buckberger, who was, I think, player development for the Oilers, he's like, okay, he's like, hey, Karl, like, stick around till 6, you're going to be an Oiler. And I'm like, sweet. Okay. Yeah. So if I'm not a King, I'm going to be an Oiler. Like, I know that.
That's
so
cool.
I get to the draft, we're sitting there, and I'm feeling good. Like, a lot of kids are super nervous, right? Because they have no idea where they're going.
Yeah.
Whereas I know I'm not going past 6th. And so everything starts happening. LA comes up, and they go almost completely off the board by picking a guy, Thomas Hickey, who was ranked, I think, 30th, and they pick him 4th. He was a good junior player. He was very, very offensive, but it was kind of weird, right? Like, I knew they needed a defenseman,
right?
But they picked him. And so I was like, that's so strange, but that's fine. Like, Oilers, here we come.
Yeah.
And then Washington goes up, and George McPhee's up there, and he just, says his normal draft stuff. And then he says, and Washington Capitals are proud to select from the London. And that's what he starts, from the London. And I'm like, yeah, okay. He's picking Sam Gagner. He was ranked right behind me. And then he stops himself. You know how things happen.
Yeah.
A lot in your head in a short amount of time. And then he stops himself and shakes his head, and he goes, from the Calgary Hitman, Karl Alzner. I'm just like, what happened? Like, how the heck do these guys want me? Like, this makes 0 sense. And I will say, I was super excited. Like, I check their scores every single day because of Ovi. I check them in Pittsburgh every day because I wanted to see what Ovi and Sid were doing. And so it was just like, holy crap, like, this is so strange. You go on the stage, do all that stuff, and then you meet everybody around the draft table. And I just remember saying to one of the guys, because I told a joke at the combine and it was a terrible joke. I remember saying to the guy, like, I thought there's no chance you guys were going to draft me, especially after the joke I told. And the one guy's just like, I guess that's the type of sense of humor we have. So it worked. And I'm like, all right. So that was the draft. And then yeah, I got so yeah, top five. It was pretty intense, but we had, I mean, it wasn't the most stacked draft that they've ever had, but we had some really good
Yeah.
players that were super successful. Drew Doughty was my partner at the World Juniors, and he ended up getting drafted by LA the next year. And so he was that defenseman that they ended up wanting, I think.
Yeah.
Then, they go on to win a few cups or a couple cups there. So it's kind of funny how you see all these things shake out, right?
Yeah.
Edmonton didn't have a very successful run over the years that I was there, whereas LA had an extremely successful run. And then us in Washington, we were great, but we weren't LA great. You know what I mean? So it's kind of weird when you look back at the draft, how many things shake out the way they shake out.
And like to that point, PK Subban went second round that draft, and like you said, like there were people, and he had a great career in Nashville. Like it's one of those things. Like it's funny. Like if you go to your draft, you go to a lot of drafts, and you look back and you're like, I can't believe he went so low or he went so high. Like you do kind of like analyze like that, but like in the moment, you're only given with the information you have, and so kind of like other sports like baseball or football doesn't really have, but like baseball and basketball and some other ones, right? So you get drafted. But you're heading to Hershey, right? You're going to play with the Bears, which for those who don't know, it's like the minor. I don't want to say minor leagues, but like
it's the minors.
Yeah, minors of like the affiliate, right? Minors of and the affiliate of the Capitals, which makes sense even for like a lot of draft picks head down there. Like you look at some greatest athletes of all time, they started down there. So like, what was that like, and how did that form your career? Were there any players that like I sure we could go back and look, but were there any players you played with in Hershey that eventually you met up in Washington or vice versa or things like that? And then, talk to us a little bit about, the Calder Cup, kind of things like that. Just your whole experience in Hershey.
Yeah. So Hershey was, looking back on it now, I think, super, very, very fond memories, right? At the time, it's like the last place in the world you want to be, right? So all you want to do is make the NHL. And so, and I knew there was expectations for me to make it. So I was very, very determined to do that. And so my first training camp, I know I'm 99% sure going back to junior because I still have my 19-year-old year in junior. So it was a really cool learning experience. My D partner was another guy who was just drafted as well that I ended up playing World Juniors with that next year. So we kind of were going through these things together, which was really, really fun. And then, so I go back, play junior, come back to the next season, 20-year-old year. And I'm like, all right, I'm making this team, like this is happening. And we go through training camp. I have a good camp. We're down to, there's like 5 of us left at camp. And I think only one other defenseman, a little bit older guy than me. And I'm like, I need to play so.
Oh no.
He was in the same boat. And so we drive to the rink together. We play this game. He has a goal. Chris has a goal and an assist. I have 2 assists. We win the game. We're in the car after celebrating, like, yeah, like we made this team. Like, this is sick. We couldn't have played better than we did. And we go the next day. They make all the other cuts. So it's just me, Chris, and this other guy, Quentin Lang, left. And we're just like so fired up. We have the team builder the next day. We're going paintballing. And so we just cannot wait. We get to the rink that day and they say, hey, coach, just want to talk to you 3. And we're just like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, we have the team builder today. Why do they want to talk to us? Are they going to tell us to go get an apartment or like what's happening?
Right.
And so I don't know what their meetings were like, but I go in and I've done the math in my head. There's 6 defensemen. I'm the 7th, like I'm on the team. And so I get in there and Bruce Boudreau was now the coach and George McPhee, the GM. And they're just like, look, obviously we'd like to take 7 defensemen. But with your contract, because I was drafted 5th, I have all these bonuses. And even though the bonuses don't count towards your salary, they count towards your cap hit. And so they're like, because of your contract, we only have, I think it was like $800,000 in cap space. We want you here, but we can't afford to keep you here.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to send you down to Hershey. And I was just like, no freaking way. Like that
Damn.
sucks. I was so frustrated. And then it was a similar situation with Chris. His contract wouldn't allow him to. And then Quentin Lang, I don't know why they ended up sending him down. He was 28, 29, an older guy at the time. So anyways, we go down to Hershey and I'm just like inside moping around. I'm pissed, right? But outwardly, I can't be that way because
Yeah.
I'll never get a chance if I'm a bad teammate, bad guy.
Right.
And so the whole time I was there, I was just like, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. Do whatever it takes. Get the heck out of here. And so I went about my business. I didn't do enough outside of the rink. I was also underage, so I didn't really get to do all the things that everybody else was doing. And then I remember getting a call up at it was Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, and at this time in Hershey, I was still first line power play, first line penalty kill. I was doing all the things, and I come up here and I'm like, holy crap! Like Mike Green is here. He's going to be the power play guy. I mean, Ovi's there, so there's only one defenseman that gets to be out there. Like, I'm if I make this team, I'm never going to be on the power play. Like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do to stick if I'm going to be here, right? And so my expectations were just completely adjusted at that point. I ended up staying up for a bit, played 30 games total that year, and then go back down and just had a completely different mindset.
Right.
And so we ended up, I think John Carlson that year came and met us during the playoffs. And so that was my first like intro to John. And then we ended up going on an absolute tear. We had a sick team. We win. I was concussed in playoffs. I missed a round and a half. I don't remember a single thing that happened. I don't remember lifting the trophy. I don't remember the after party. I don't remember anything. So that first year in Hershey was a complete blur. And then the next year, it was a very similar story come training camp, right? Except now I have Carlson as a competitor who ends up being one of my really, really good buddies. And, probably the person between him and Jay Beagle that I was closest to the entire. And so we end up going through the exact same thing the next year. He gets to play a bunch of games. I don't remember how many he played his first year, 40 maybe. I played 20, just over 20. And so we're going up and down. If he's up, then I'm down, vice versa, right? And then I just remember we played a game in St. Louis, and before the game, the coaches said, like, look, we can only keep one of you. We're going to keep one for the rest of the year. So it's whoever plays better tonight is most likely going to be that guy. And he said to both of us at the same time, we're good buddies here. And so we play the game. I had a good game, but John had a really good game.
Yeah.
And he ended up staying up the rest of the year. So I go back down, finish out the season. They call me up for the playoffs to join John. I only ended up playing one game 7 against Montreal, which we should have won, but ran into a hot goalie. It is what it is in sports. And then back down for another playoff run. And we ended up same thing. We just got hot. We really didn't feel like there was any team that was close to us. It was the weirdest playoff run ever. And it'll take me a while to explain the story, but just take my word for it. It was really, really strange. And then we ended up winning the finals again. And this time I remember, most of everything, but I ended up having a pretty significant injury throughout playoffs that derailed my entire summer of training. And so I took my licks. I paid my dues, as we say. We always chirp guys that don't ever play in the minors as prima donnas and guys that don't know what it's like to grind it out, be on the bus, especially if you come from college too. We always chirp those guys. But yeah, it ended up being a really, really fun time. You're never tighter with a team than you are playing a small town in the minors because there's nothing else to do but hang out with each other. So I had a really great time there. And I look back on it very fondly now, but during it, I was like half checked out, I wanted to be in so bad. So it was an interesting time.
And you brought up a good point. I think a lot of people also can relate to is like, right. You had the the wherewithal to all of a sudden be like, I got to adapt, right? Like I gotta change what's going on because like you still have that end goal, but you're like, you recognize that like, okay, if I want to get there, if I want to be a part of like that power play line or something, or if I got to do something, I got to adapt. And I think that's something, really that, stuck out to me during that. And you kind of mentioned it, that team was the Caps team. And, as a Caps fan, especially growing up in the area, it's like, you remember, especially from like 2010 through like 2018, finally before it happened, like Caps were always like right there. like right there. The team was good. It's just, like you said, the hump is tough. And so when you were at practice, you're going, like you said, you're going up against Ovi, just arguably one of the best players of all time. Backstrom, Carlson, Johansson, Green, all these guys you're practicing with. And like you said, you became friends with Carlson and still buddies with him. But like, tell me a little about not only your playing career, how those practices maybe make you sharper. I can't imagine, going, well, I'm curious if like that gets off thing where you're like, okay, I can go up against him. I want to beat him. It's like same kind of mindset with Ovi. But like, tell me that. And then also I wonder, do you have like a favorite Ovi story where like, you were kind of like, man, he kind of like did something. You're like, wow, that's tough. Or like, it's something where like he came to you as like a teammate, or he's just, he seems like a good guy. So like, I'm curious to know just like, what's one of your favorite things you remember about playing with him?
Yeah, so it was tons of fun. I mean, because obviously Ovi's the name that everybody thinks about first, but we also had a guy by the name of Nick Backstrom, who everyone always forgets about, which is insane. And
he's amazing.
As anyone who's played with him knows, that Nick never ever got enough credit for what he did. And so having both those guys do what they did, and then throw on Alexander Semin, who was maybe the most talented of them all, but just didn't necessarily have the same drive that the other two did. Always getting a chance to play against them. It was the same Getzlaff thing, right? Like I was still going to beat them every time. The difference with Ovi is that like what he does to guys on the ice, his ability to shoot through the screen from distance, is not something he would do really in practice, because he didn't want to hurt anybody. He didn't want to bury one into a foot and break your foot. And so he wouldn't always give us his full 100%. But I mean, there were times in battles and stuff where I'm for sure giving him my 100%. Like I can't not lose to him. But he wouldn't necessarily give it back. And so it was tough to always get a really good gauge. But I did see what his 100% was once I went to Montreal, and his 100% is pretty freaking good. So I was pleasantly surprised, but the practice side of it was great. I mean, I loved it. It was always such a fun challenge for me to try and figure out how like Nick would think on passes, how he was going to, try and look me off and throw a pass a different direction with elevation under it, or through the stick, through the legs, like all those things. I'm paying close attention. Like Nick would sometimes give the rest of us passing tips, right? Like he's giving other very good players passing tips, right? That's how good he was. And it was just so much fun to learn from those guys. And we were at the time too, where we were all pretty young. Like everybody was under the age of 25, like the core of the team. And so they were like, it was serious, obviously, because it was professional hockey, but I think it was way less serious than a lot of people would think, right?
Yeah.
Like, they all had tons of fun. It was, eating whatever you want, drinking whatever you want, and then going out there and just having fun, playing pond hockey, winning games 6-4, 6-3, 6-5, whatever it was. Like we were the cardiac caps. It was give everybody a heart attack and then find a way to win. And so it was just so much fun. And we struggled at times at the defensive side of the game, which was frustrating for me because that was part of my role. And so it was a little bit strange, but yeah, we had tons of fun and became really, really close with probably 6 or so guys, right? We came up with Semyon Varlamov was a goalie, Michael Neuwirth, another great goalie, Braden Holtby, another great goalie, right? We had all those guys come up, me, Carly, Jay Beagle, Eric Fair, Matthew Perot, like Johansson, we were all in the same age range, and we all played together for a long time. So you just get really, really tight, really fast. And then, there's tons of Ovi stories from over the years, but one that I think was really funny in it, I think a lot of people know it now, just the way he speaks. He could speak good English, but he'd still mess up words fairly often. And there was one time we were playing an exhibition game in Carolina, and he was yelling from the bench at a player on Carolina. His name was, I always get them mixed up. There's a Troy Terry and there's another Terry. So not the one that's in Anaheim, different one. And anyways, he yelled from the bench, says, "Terry, you're a suck." That's what he said, right? And so we all are just looking at each other like, man, if you're going to chirp somebody, like at least learn how to say it in proper English. It's not "you're a suck." It's "Terry, you suck."
Right.
He was just be like, whatever, that guy's a suck. And so we would just start dying laughing. So everything was, you're a suck, right?
Yeah.
You had a bad game, you'd come into the room after and be like, I was a suck today. Like it was just that. And then it went from that to, instead of saying that, you were a Terry. So if you had a bad game, like I was a Terry out there. And so that just became our thing. So if now I ever have like a day where like my mind's not in it, or I played bad in my men's league, it's just like, oh man, I'm such a Terry. And so it even became our playoff motto on our t-shirts. You usually get a t-shirt made that's like, 20 strong
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever it is. And ours was, don't be a Terry. And it was just all from that one time in the exhibition game where he called him a
That's fucking
stuff.
hysterical.
Yeah. And then the one of the rallying cries the year that the Caps won the cup was before the season. Or I think it was after the season, before, I can't remember. He goes, we're not going to be suck this year. Like that's what he said. And then it just took off. Everybody said that. It was on t-shirts and everything.
Yeah.
We're going to be suck this year. And so it's one of those things where he meant it one way, came out a different way, and took on a whole life of its own.
That's so funny that you say that too, because like outside looking in, everyone's like, oh, like that like there's so much more that happened to that story. But then when he came out in 2018 and said it, so that's pretty fucking funny. But also like like you said, I'm sure you have so many different ones that like you could go all the way back to. And gosh, it's also, as a fan especially too, like it's cool to hear like, and you saw it on the ice too, like you guys are a good group of guys and you're close, and people also think for you guys were a young group of kids just getting after it. And like, it also, like you said, you guys it's not like you guys played in a super, hard division or anything like that, where you had, some other great freaking teams in that fucking division. But like, it's just one of those things where it's like, you guys gave it your all.
Yeah.
But,
I think it went around the league too. People started taking notice that this was a really fun team and fun.
Yeah.
There's a few other ones that we knew about, like San Jose had that same reputation, and they were also really, really good during that time. We heard the same thing, that Pittsburgh was pretty fun as well, and unfortunately they were also good. So I think there's a lot to be said for just having a really fun atmosphere and not taking yourselves too serious. Like we were very lucky with the coaches that we had too, that they understood the dynamic in the dressing room. Yeah. And they kind of let us do what we needed to do. So yeah, it's the same thing in whatever you do. If the work atmosphere is good, then you're going to get a better product.
Agree. So tell us about like, and so what we're going to allude to at the end there. I know we're coming up on time, so I want to, just get all this last stuff in, but like, on your looking back at your hockey career, all even like the days where you ended in Montreal, I think first off, round of applause. You had a great career. I think you did fantastic, and you helped the Capitals in a lot of ways that, like you said, I think just being part of the camaraderie, being part of the team, that aspect plays just as well as being on the ice. So, as a fan, thank you for what you did for the team. But, how do you, like you said, like, how do you kind of, with hockey, you had a great career. How did you kind of see that transition from when, kind of going at the end of your career to be like, okay, like, what do I still want to do? You mentioned men's league, which I was about to ask if you're in like a beer league or something like that, because that'd be hysterical to me if like you just get this Joe Schmo and it's like, okay, we're playing Karl and some of the old Caps. That's got to be fun. But like, what was like that transition like, and also like how, how did you arrive? We can kind of jump to a little. How did you arrive like at Thundercat? Like, kind of how did that bridge happen towards the end of the career, in between, and then getting to where you are?
Yeah, so I'll address the beer league thing. So that was always my dream. I always wanted to play beer league. I watched my dad play his beer league games when he was younger, and it was like, I cannot wait to get there one day. I hope I still have that.
It's the dream.
Yeah, I hope I still have the drive, and like I'm physically able to play. And yeah, as soon as I found a team, I was like, yep, I'm in. Just send me the schedule. I'll come and play as much as I can. So I don't miss too many games. I'm there quite a bit.
Awesome.
I was texting with the guy who's our captain this morning about it, because there's a team that's in the league just below us that shouldn't be, and they've won, I think, 38 games straight. And I've been trying to get them to be bumped up so we can play them, because our team's pretty good, and we want to play the best. And so I just got confirmation that they're going to be moving up, I think, next year. So that's where my head's at. I'm still fired up about it. And then the Thundercat thing. Yeah. So I've always been, I guess you could say, like a networker, right? Like I'm always very interested in talking to people, curious in what they do. I try and ask a lot of questions, not necessarily because it's something that I want to do, but I'm interested. Like, how did you end up there? And so I keep a lot of people's phone numbers. I check in with them a lot.
That's cool.
old teammates, trainers, whatever it is. It's just the type of guy that I am. So it really frustrates me when I get someone that doesn't respond via text. Like email, I understand. I'm not the best with email. Things slip through. But like a text message, I don't. I go to bed with 0 messages unread, right?
Nice.
Like that's the type of guy I am. So if someone doesn't get back to me, it really grinds my gears. And
That's
so
perfect for this role.
yeah, exactly. And so how this happened with Thundercat in the tech world was we're living in our house in Arlington, and I really like to work on the yard. I'm one of the few guys probably
Big
that
long
played.
guy.
Yeah, exactly. Few guys that played in the NHL that cut their own grass, right? Like I like to do that,
Oh yeah.
maintenance, pick weeds, all that stuff. And so I'd be out there all the time, especially in the off season, doing that. And there's this other guy that's like walking. We live, perpendicular to each other, I guess. And he's always walking up and down the street on his phone. And he's a younger guy. I noticed that he's got a nice car. He's driving like a Range Rover at the time. His wife was driving an Audi. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like this guy looks pretty young. He's got nice cars, but he's never leaving the house. He's just on the phone all the time. Super strange. And so I'm out there plucking weeds, and I just like flag him down. I'm like, hey, come over here. So he comes over and he's like, what's going on? He's on the phone. And I'm like, I just want to chat. When you're done on your phone call, just come by. So he's like, hey, I'll call you back. So he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm just so curious, man. Like you're a young guy living in this neighborhood and you're always on the phone. Like, what do you do for a living? And he laughs and he's like, well, I do like, it's like cybersecurity sales. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Like that's really different than anything that I know. Like, tell me about it. And so he starts explaining to me what they do and some of the issues that they're seeing. And I start panicking, like, crap, like, am I doing enough to protect myself? And I tell him about my background. He's like, well, I mean, as someone who's in your position, like you definitely should be protecting yourselves. This is how you can do it. VPNs and password protection, all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just like, holy crap. So I go in, tell my wife that, and she's just like, here we go again. Like when I get in on something, like I'm full throttle. And so it turned into a thing where it would take me an hour to take out the garbage, because I would go out there, I'd see Dan and we'd start talking about it. And so as I finished my last year in Washington, I'm still there because we hadn't signed anywhere. And he's just like, hey, like obviously I hope you play hockey for a long, long time. Like we've become pretty good friends at this point. But when you're done, if you ever want to get into cybersecurity or tech, like let me know. I think we'd be able to find you something because you seem to care about this more than most people I talk to. And I'm like, I kind of laugh. I'm like, okay, like I don't know anything about this, so probably not. And go to my time in Montreal. 3 years passes there. Then I decide not to play anymore. I'm back home. It's been like a year and I'm just bored out of my mind, right? Like I need to do something. I would love to be back in DC because we loved it there. And so I say to my wife, I'm like, hey, I might call Dan and see if he was serious about that job opportunity. And she's like, you don't know anything about cybersecurity. Like, you're not going to want to do that. And I'm like, well, let me just call him. So I called Dan and I say, all right, I know you offered me a job back in the day. Were you actually serious about that? And I think he was shocked that I was actually calling about that. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, two things. Like, what does that look like? And I want to make sure I still have my summers off so I can come to the lake and hang out. He's like,
boy, do I have a job for you.
yeah. He's like, you follow me on Instagram, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you see how much vacation I'm on? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you can do this from pretty much anywhere. And I'm like, okay, check. And he's like, and in terms of the job, he's like, we'll have to figure out exactly, but you'll probably be doing a lot of dinners, golfing, things like that. And I'm like,
twist my arm.
like, okay, I can do this. And so Thundercat sponsors me for a visa, bring me over. They put me in a role as the channel manager for the cyber team. It's not all dinners and golf. There's definitely more, especially when you have 400 different partners that you work with. So it's definitely been an extreme learning curve, but it was a great move. I'm very happy that I made it. Yeah. But it was a big leap of faith, right? Like that's a 180 from anything that I ever did. So it's been a ton of fun, and it's been over 2 years now and still going strong.
Yeah, man. No, it's funny. I currently work for a company called ServiceNow. and I got my start. Actually, I got my start with Carosoft Technology, like a distributor, big in the Northern Virginia area. And I was supporting VMware, and I couldn't tell you what they did or what a hyper converged infrastructure looks like or anything like that. And to this day, like there's so much more you could learn about it. But like I think, if you're like kind of like you said, if you're willing to learn it, some things click really, like you get like, oh, that's actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. But at the end of the day, it's funny, like it, especially now in my career with sales, I still feel like if I didn't have like a solutions consultant or some sort of tech on with me, I wouldn't sell anything, or I wouldn't be able to keep customers because like they might ask me something that it's just above my brink of like technical acumen, and I'm like, And I think like to what you said, like especially for those who know the industry, like it's like a lot of people when they first start, they don't know, and like it's definitely okay to like have those more in-depth knowledgeable product specialists, things like that on your calls or things like that, because it it's only going to give a credibility more to the product. You don't want to sell it wrong, you don't want to get it wrong. So
Exactly.
I completely I get it, because especially anyone, unless you are computer science or you are a solutions engineer or something like that, a lot of it you're like, I can't wrap my brain around. Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean that's, and the thing too is like when it really comes down to it, it's like you obviously want something that works, but you also want to work with people that you like, right? And so I hopefully can be that part of it,
Right.
work with people that you like, and then our company actually does good work. So hopefully
That's big.
you talk to them, it's like we should have those two pillars for you right there. So I, going back to what I said about hating to lose and having high expectations, it works good for me because I want to beat out all of our competitors. I want everyone to beat us, and I think that they should. But at the same time, not knowing as much as other people do in the industry really bugs me, and I do my best to try and take certifications and involved on as many conversations as possible. But they always say like in order to remember one thing, you got to let go of something else. So I'm like, which things can I let go of?
Exactly.
So I can remember some tech stuff. So yeah, it's pretty interesting spot.
No, yeah, man, for sure. And it's fun. Do you play a lot of golf, or do you play golf like in like a cyber? Oh, we'll talk about a little bit at the end there. For sure. So like, lastly, like you're in your business development right now, right? So like, what, like again, this is because you're still getting early in the spot for that, like what's something you, especially maybe with this industry, you see yourself trying to grow into, or like what's a role, like do you see yourself maybe being like an account executive, like you want to be out in the field meeting with customers, meeting with people, or do you see more of like a director maybe kind of role where you want to like lead a bunch of people to like have that drive and share that, like where do you see yourself maybe like with this industry or role, or things that you've learned in maybe the next like 5 years or so?
Yeah, it's hard to say because I didn't even know what this role was originally when I got it, right?
Yeah.
And so when I came in, I didn't know what that role was. So I don't know necessarily what the next step would be. I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing right now because it's a good mix of needing to know a little bit while still being able to just free flow and talk with people and build relationships. And so where I'm at right now, I'm pretty comfortable. So who knows where it goes from here? Who knows if they'll have me around any longer, right? We're a small business, so we can only stay under 150 people. So everybody's kind of got a number on their head. So whether I get in front of customers, I'm not sure. I don't have that background that a lot of our sales team have. We have anyone that we hire that talks with customers has a pretty serious background.
Yeah.
I don't have that in any of these industries. So, who knows if that's something I'll ever do. But where I'm at right now, I'm pretty much the liaison to all of our FSI partners. So I am trying to get them to understand why Thundercat, because a lot of times, so for anyone who doesn't know, who's here more for the hockey side of things, we're what you call a VAR. So we're a value added.
Oh man, wow. Love that you just use VAR. That's
exactly. Well, you know what? I had to explain it to all my family and friends. Like, what the heck is a VAR? I'm like, like a VAR, value added reseller. They're like,
they're like, you watching soccer? Like, you look at the VAR and the line? Like, what are you talking about?
So I finally was like, okay, like think of us as like a hockey shop. right? Like we sell Bauer, we sell CCM, we sell Warrior, we have sticks, shin pads, gloves. We can
Perfect.
sharpen your skates if you need it, right? You come to us to get everything that you need, and we send you on your way, right? So
Exactly.
that's kind of the way we are. We'll sharpen your skates, but we're not going to do a bunch of other customizations and services, not at Thundercat at least. And
Yeah.
so they were all like, "Oh, okay, that makes more sense." And so like my job now essentially is to have them realize that, look, like we can actually partner and help you. Like
Yeah.
we're good at what we do, and a lot of times we may even have more knowledge of the customer than you guys do,
Yep.
and most likely have more knowledge than you about the products that you're trying to sell and better pricing. So think about us, right? And I think that once we get in the door with some of them, they're just like, oh, okay, this makes more sense than some of maybe the other ones that we've worked with in the past. And so for me, it's just I try and get my foot in the door, talk with them about whatever they want to talk about. I mean, it sounds stupid, but try to become friends with them. But the thing with me is that I actually do become friends with everybody, right?
Right.
I joke about it with my wife, like if you count your friends as like equaling up to $1, she wants 4 quarters and I want 100 pennies, right? Like I want as many friends as possible. I want to talk to, so I'm a good guy for this role.
Yep.
And then we just hopefully can take down some business from there. So I like where I'm at right now. I mean,
Awesome.
who knows where the upward mobility goes and where it takes me.
Yeah.
But like I said, we're a small business, so we'll see how long they keep me around. Haven't got fired yet.
There you go. Right, and that's what the job is, right? I think it's funny. I'm just trying not to get fired.
Yeah.
But it's funny, like I think you mentioned it. If you were looking at like screw a resume, screw anything like that, if you were looking at just like all the things you said, if I interviewed with you as like someone, especially in this industry, I'd be like, he's got all the he's got all the qualities and characters that I'm looking for in someone in this role. Because like case in point, you flagging down, what was his name, Dan, saying like, hey, can you come here for a sec? That in itself right there is a check. Like, yeah, this guy can do this, because you just got to be, like you said, you got to just be able to talk to someone. You got to be able to be, put yourself out there. My wife all the time is like, I still don't know what you do. And essentially it's like, I get that. I understand that. Cause like, if I try to tell you that I'm a renewal account manager and I, keep customer voice, essentially it's a fancy way of saying I just make sure our customers stay with us. And if they need anything, just trying to make sure they're happy. Yeah. So like, it's just one of those things where you said like, and 90% of my job is just talking to people. Like it's literally whether it's people internally, externally, just making sure things are going well, which is like, I love doing that. Case in point, what we're doing right now. I just love talking to individuals. It makes life go by so much better. You learn about individuals, what they do. And to your point, I think anyone in the industry will say it is like, everyone knows so many different people, especially I guess especially on the OEM side, like so many people know many different people from different vendors and different things. Like, hey, I worked with so and so. We worked 3 years at Cisco together. Now we're together at Thundercat, and or like we went to Carousel together, and then now he's at like Appian, or like I'm at like that's the nature of the industry. So like it pays to have friends in the industry, especially, and when partnerships and things like that come along, a lot of people will say like, oh, I know someone there, I can hit them up, see what things are going on. So I think like everything you said, like leading up to this, especially in this interview, especially for this like industry and role, that's literally what someone who's hiring is going to be looking for. So like anyone listening out there, like that's it's Karl nailed it on the head. Like that's exactly what you want to be doing. If you're social, if you're interested, this job is something you can learn everything else. You can pick all that up. Just having that characteristic of being not afraid to just be like, hey, I'm Karl, nice to meet you. Or, I'm Joe, nice to meet you. Let's talk. Let's just learn more about each other. I know we're pushing on time, so I just have 3 questions. One, as I'm a new dad, so like 10-month-old, she's doing great. It's crazy. Congrats. You have two. Thanks. You have 2 kids, a daughter and a son, correct? Like, what's one piece of wisdom, especially? I think you're correct me if I'm wrong. 35. I think I'm about to turn 20, so I'm like 7 years younger. What's one piece of insight you would give as like a young dad and to other younger dads out there as well?
Yeah. So we had 3 kids. Believe it or not.
My God, I missed one.
No, we hide the other one, so no one knows. No, I'm just kidding. I would say, you know what, it's tough. I mean, because you're just never prepared. You got no clue what you're doing half the time, right? Unless you have a very young sibling, right? Like my wife has a brother that's, what is he? 10, 14
Oh, wow, okay.
years younger, something like that. So so she was a little bit more prepared than I was. I mean, I always just, I guess, try and remind myself, like what it's like, what it's like to be excited about something. How I want to explain a story to like, okay, you said you like golf, right? Like how excited I am to come and talk about my round of golf because I just broke 80, right? Or whatever, or I
Congrats.
just stuck 1 to 3 feet from 210 yards away. Like I'm so fired up to tell my wife that. And she's just kind of like, okay, humoring me, right? It's the same thing sometimes with the kids too, right? Like they're trying to tell you this story
No
that could
problem.
take 5 seconds, but it's going to take 5 minutes. But they're so excited to tell you, like trying to remind yourself that all these little things just mean so much to them, right?
Yeah, that's a good
And
piece.
but at the same time, look, I understand like you're on to the next thing. You got to keep moving. The day can't slow down and stand still. So I think just kind of giving yourself a break. It's okay to feel frustrated at times, but also, like look, put the phone down, separate. It's
Yeah.
time to listen to them, which I have a tough time with, I'll be honest, because because I'm new to the industry here and I want to be on it. If someone's asking me a question, I want to be there, but I need to know when to kind of separate that. So I'd say that. And then also just like a general lowering of standards, right? Like you're not always going to look put together. They're not always going to get to bed at the perfect time, but know that, things happen and it is what it is. So
Yeah.
like we were telling a story yesterday. We were walking through the airport fairly recently with one kid who was throwing up and the other kid who was covered up to pee up to his nipples. And it's just like, look, it is what it is, right? Everybody
Got
else
here.
has been in a position like this. So yeah, lower your standards a little bit and just remind yourself to maybe slow down. I think that's important.
I appreciate that. I like that a lot. And it is funny you mentioned, and on a serious note, it is funny you mentioned that. My wife many times have been like, do you have to like respond to so and so, like with work especially, just because like different account executives that I work with when they work, things like that, or just people I worked with in the past. It's like she's always been like, hey, like, are you messaging that? And I'm the same way where I'm like, if I don't get it done right now, or I don't make a note or do something, I feel like I'm going to forget it, or like I just want to make sure I get it done. So this way, like I'm on top of things. But realizing that, okay, like realistically, can this be sent at 8 or like 9 a.m. as opposed to 8 p.m. or something like that? Is it really going to make a difference? But I completely agree. I think that lowering of standards definitely hit a little bit for sure. It's like sometimes you got to just do, you got the cards there and you're like, hey, we're here. We'll change out later, but we got to do what we got to do.
Well, I think the other thing too is to remember is like we follow so many people on social media.
Mhm.
And so we're like, oh wow, look at that
Look
diaper
at
bag.
that,
That's
right?
organized perfectly, or they have all the snacks, or stroller looks great, whatever it may be. But it's like, let's be serious, right? Like
That is right. I
it's
agree.
not real,
No, it's not. It's not. They took that. They took the 1 minute of like that actually all that happened, but then
Yeah.
they don't show like what happened after or before, where like the kids either chucking it across the room or like absolutely just dumping all that hard work you just put out, and you're like, well, all right, then that was
Yeah.
that was shame on me. I should have known they were gonna do that.
Nothing's worse than folding a whole thing of laundry sitting there and then the kid goes and dumps it over, right? It's like, damn, happens. So
Yeah, no, I feel that. And then second part of like the three thing I had, I don't know if this is true, and I'm very curious. Like I was just go like while I was doing my research for the show, there's something out there that says you're friends with Michael Bublé. Is that true? Are you actually friends with him, or like is that what's that? Is that just fake?
yeah, so he's also from Burnaby.
Okay.
And so we have so he's a Burnaby guy. We've got a few hockey players that have come from Burnaby as well. But like I said, it's not small enough of a place that you would just run into these
Yeah,
people
yeah,
on
yeah.
the street. You know
Right.
what I mean? And so we were putting together a fantasy football league and trying to get my buddies that wanted to play. And we got to, I think we were at like 6 guys that said that they could commit to playing. And we're like, okay, well, let's fill it with a few other people that we know, right? Let's try and get to 12 if we can. And I'm like, I've got 2 guys here that would want to play. And so Dan, the guy that I work with at Thundercat, is one of them. And Dan's like, well, I got my good buddy Dennis Kudla, who is local here. He's a tennis player. He's like, he would love to play too. So I'm like, okay, to my buddies back home, I got Dan and Dennis. They both want to play. And then one of my friends growing up, he's like, and I got, he's a trainer, personal trainer. He's like, yeah, I've got a buddy that would be interested. His name's Mike. I'll send him. I'll put him in the chat as well. So
Mike.
he comes into the chat. And he's like, hey everyone, this is Mike. Mike goes, yeah, hey guys, thanks for having me. And then can't remember what it was, but at some point We got everybody's names. I don't know if it was an email or what. Oh, it was an e-transfer for or like a Venmo for our thing. And it came by and it said his full name. And I'm like, wait a sec, I forgot that my buddy is his trainer. And because he had posted a video of it one time. And so I messaged him right away. I'm like, is Mike like Buble Mike?
Yeah.
He's just like, yeah, that is him. But he didn't really want me to say anything until anyone finds out. And I'm just like, that's absolutely hilarious. And so we've got one guy, like this is our third year playing in this league. And we've got one guy who texted me and he's like, hey, is this guy, because he has a fake name on his stuff. And he's like, hey, is so-and-so just like a massive Michael Bublé fan? Like he posts all these pictures of like Bublé selfies and stuff like that. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, that is Bublé.
Yeah.
He's like, no. So-and-so, like I was using name. John. He's like, no, John. And I'm like, no, John is Michael. John is a fake name. And he was just like, whoa, exactly. No idea.
Sidebar: is Michael Bublé nice at fantasy football, or is he just is he the taco of your league? He's just this garbage.
He is sick.
He
is so freaking good. He won the league the first 2 years. He lost in the playoffs this year, but he's very, very good. He's very well studied. He's like, I listen to fantasy football radio every time I'm in the car, so I'm like always up to date, the waiver wire, all that stuff. And I go to like pick him up, and he's already got him. I'm just like, man, how do you do this?
Right. He's got the edge somehow.
Yeah, he's got a lot of friends in the industry. So
I was just about to say he's about to text someone and be like, hey, is he actually playing? Like,
no, he's awesome. He's a great guy, super nice, very competitive as well. Very good addition to the team, and it's been fun. Like he's, as we always say, he's just a guy. Yeah,
exactly. He's just a guy. He just happens to be really good at singing, and he's a chill dude. But he's a guy at the end of the day. That's funny. And after seeing him at the All-Star game this past year, he was hysterical. Like it was so funny. He just seems like a really down, like normal guy. He's got a great sense of humor. He loves to have fun. He's an entertainer too, right? Like he knows what to say to make people tick and have a good time, and like different from a hockey player, right? Like you got to be so careful with everything that you say because someone's going to spin it the wrong way in the media. Whereas an entertainer, a lot of times it's like, I'm saying this to get that reaction, right? Yeah.
Like he's just great all around at what he does, and so I was so fired up to see him at that All-Star game.
That's awesome. Oh man! And again, I think that's one thing you learn from like this kind of conversation, right? Is that like I have like so many other great like questions and like love talking to you. So like it was honestly like I thank you so much. But lastly, and I've asked this question to like former football players. I've asked it to real estate agents, actors. I've asked this question to anyone. And so like just bear with me. And I'm very curious about your response, especially as a hockey. In fact, I asked, you might know Adam Ernie. He plays for the Oilers now, but when I was talking to him, he was on the Wings. I asked him this question. So like I'm not sure if have you seen the movie Step Brothers?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like when Dale and Brennan go to the playground and they got all those fifth graders, but at the end of the movie they fight. Well, like in that kind of like situation, I try to set this tune there because like I also talk to people across the pond or like wherever, and they've never seen the movie, or they don't know, or you never know what you're gonna get. So now that you've seen, you kind of have a good idea. In that kind of like situation, or like in a situation like that, how many fifth graders do you think you could like take on or like take down before they kind of like overpower you? And like I'm just so curious to know like where your range like lays. Where do you land on like how many fifth graders you could beat up?
Oh, it's fun. It's a good question. I used to like to ask people these questions too when I was podcasting. It was like, just think outside the box a little bit. And so I think I have a bit of experience with this. And the reason I say that is because I'm coaching, I coach hockey, and one of the drills that we do is like a capture the flag type drill, right? And so it's about 40 kids against like 7 coaches. And so me and some of the other coaches were just talking about this. It's like, wow, that's pretty intimidating when you see 40 kids coming at you trying to tag you, right? And he's like, it begs the question, like, how many of those kids could you fight? Like, we literally were talking about this. And so when you said fifth graders?
Fifth graders, yeah.
So fifth graders are starting to get a little bit bigger. The ones that I'm on the ice with are like grade 2. So it's a little different. if they were grade 2, I could say if I stuck an arm out and started spinning around, I could probably knock down easily 10. But when we're going to fifth graders, I would say, oh man, you know what? I easily knock down 10, I'm saying, right?
10,
I
we
think
got
fifth,
at least 10.
I think fifth graders, I could probably be in that 12 to 15 range fairly good, you
I
know?
respect that answer so much because it's an honest answer. I have an idea of what a fifth grader looks like, and you can do it. Fun little fact, love you, Jahan, but I spoke to this Formula E driver last week, and he's regular guy, like if you look at him, not like he's not jacked, but he's not like and he said he was like, I can take down like 20, 25. And I was like, I gotta know where this number is coming from. Like 20, 25. I was like, you can't use your car, right? Like you have to use your hands.
And they're not one after the other
exactly. They're
surrounding
you. Oh, right. And so but yeah, like he said that. So I appreciate that because like I agree. That's an honest fifth graders now. Fifth graders are getting recruited by like, Saban and all those guys. Like it's just they're built different these days. So like I really respect this as a 6'4" defenseman in the NHL. I respect the hell out of that. Like I respect the hell out of that answer. Karl, you've been a great guest, and I really appreciate it. And also, like I know, it's one of those things, especially like you got a lot of going on, especially you're busy guys. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Last little thing, is there anything that's special to you that you after doing that question, I like to, do something else, but is there anything that's like special to you, something that you like to raise awareness for, anything that like, you want people to be like, oh, I didn't know that existed. I'd love to check that out. Anything along those lines?
Oh, well, I mean, this is the thing where I can go down a rabbit hole because I'm a busy guy. I got tons of things happening aside from Thundercat. I'll say two things. The first thing that's most important is one of the things that my wife and I wanted to do while I was playing, and then when we ended up leaving Washington to go to Montreal, it's never materialized, but we finally got our foundation started.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so I'm super fired up about that. It's we're supposed to have our first event June 1st. We've run into a few hiccups with trying to get a 501c3, which who knew this tax exempt status was as difficult as it can be, and we're gonna be up against it now. I'm hoping that everything's still gonna happen. But
awesome.
Yes, we started a foundation just called the Alzner Foundation. It's going to support kids sports and youth enrichment in the DC area, just because like us going through it now with our kids, we're obviously privileged and can do a lot of these things, but even us, like seeing what registration fees cost for kids, especially if you have a kid that's good and wants to play travel, like, working over $3,000+ for a season in sports is difficult. Right. So being able to help provide registration fees for kids, equipment for kids, kids that have disabilities that may need special equipment or just opportunity. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing now. So that's exciting. It's been a long time coming. My wife, I mean, unfortunately, I'm going to end up taking a lot of credit for it just because my name is on it. But my wife, Mandy, is the one that's done so much work behind the scenes with it, and tons of people that have helped us out just to get to where we are now. So I'd say that's the number one thing. And then the other thing that is super fun, it probably occupies more time than it should, but it's cool, and it's a way that I get to stay in touch with some people from hockey. Me, Eric Fair, Jay Beagle, Steve Alexi, who also played in Washington. We all kind of help out with this company called Lactigo. And Lactigo is like a really, really neat product that I try and push to everybody, not necessarily for like selfish reasons because I'm a part of the company, but because it is actually a legit product that works for a massive, massive range of people. And so long story short, it's like a lactic acid reducing gel.
Yeah.
So think A535 Tiger Balm. The difference between those products is that's like just a topical, sit on your skin and burn and tingle, whereas Lactigo is the first ever company or product to be able to deliver these two molecules or compounds, I guess, carnosine and magnesium, through the skin and into the muscle. And so we've had crazy results with tons of athletes. We have like 75-80% of the NHL using it now, and it gives you the ability to skate longer, skate faster, recover faster. We have UFC fighters, marathoners, triathletes, Usain Bolt, horses, like tons of people using it now.
What?
Yeah, and so it's a really, really fun product, and we don't do any marketing. And so any marketing is like this, me telling
Yeah,
you
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
I give it to my parents. They use it on
That's cool.
arthritis, things like that. So it's got a very, very broad spectrum of what it can do. And eventually you're going to start hearing about it because I think we finally signed a deal with a marketing company. So it will be out there at some
That's
point.
awesome.
Because you try and get like McDavid, Matthews, those guys to talk about it, and they won't talk about it because it's like their own secret product,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's been tough for us, but we've also seen a lot of success. So that's
That's
like
awesome, dude.
that's my side hustle, my
Yeah,
side hustle, I guess you could say.
that's a
So
solid one to have. Also,
yeah, check it out. It's a
no,
really
yeah. I
yeah
literally just as we were talking, I was like pulling this up, and I was like, this sounds legit. Also,
yeah
like price wise, not bad. Like
yeah.
that's pretty good.
You use it for golf. I use it on my back when I golf. My hands, because I've broken them a bunch, they get super sore while I golf, so I rub it on there.
Mhm.
It all depends on how much you use. The more you use, the more you build it up in your system, and then the better results. So you
Yeah,
can go through those bottles super fast, or it can last you months, right? It just kind of
yeah.
depends.
Damn, man.
Yeah, it's worth a try, but I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm with the company, but it has science behind it. When
Yeah, right.
people's like,
Exactly.
"Oh,
It
it's
actually holds weight.
snake oil," I'm like, "It's
Yeah,
not."
yeah, yeah. Dude, that's sick. I'm gonna
Yeah,
definitely check that out. Oh man, I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate you for going. Stick around for a sec after we sign off here. I have a question about golf, but Karl, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. You've been a great guest. I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and not only hear your story, a lot of my boys who are Cavs fans are definitely going to probably tune in. And then also, I think it bridges because, like, this, I mean, I share a lot of stuff that I do on LinkedIn. So, like, a lot of my networking from like business and things like that, I think, as we kind of talked about with that topic, a lot of people are going to be interested in, glad they came on. But I really appreciate your time, man. And just thank you so much for being you and like again also what you did for the Washington Capitals. Just appreciate your time and again, man, it was a treat.
hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me the platform. It's fun to chat.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too.